Today we're going to have a look at a student essay and try and assign it a VCAA level grade. So this is an argument analysis piece. It's written in response to this article, which you can go have a look at if you want a little bit more context on the piece. Just at a glance, 855 words. It's a reasonably good length. Generally, I recommend sort of 800 to 1,000 at year 12, so that looks good, although some parts are a little bit short. I mean, that's only 48 words, and this as a first paragraph is 135. This is also a bit short. That doesn't matter too much for introductions though. As a whole, the essay is a little bit unbalanced though. This last paragraph here is 351 words. So let's dive into it. Introduction. Ben Rossiter writes a piece about why jet skis are good and bad in Melbourne City. This is a little bit general. The piece, if you read through it, is a criticism of how the e-scooter trial has been managed in Victoria, and he likens them to being jet skis of the city. So, first thing I would note here is the piece is not about jet skis, and also good and bad. It's too general. The piece is critical of e-scooters. So we'd probably want to say something instead like Ben Rossiter writes, or Ben Rossiter criticizes the e-scooter trial in Melbourne City. He's writing in response to the problems with scooters in Melbourne. Again, doesn't flow sort of particularly well and doesn't really add anything new to the first sentence, so I'd probably cut that. Rossiter's argument is that the e-scooter trial is not working, and he contends that we should stop the trial now in an impassioned tone. Flow here is not great. I would put tone a little bit above. In terms of does this have everything in introduction once? Does it have the context or the catalyst, the background? A little bit, could have a bit more. Does it have the contention? Loosely, yeah. Could be a bit clearer though. So context, catalyst, contention, author. Yes, we've got the author. It needs mention of the audience, and it also needs mention of the text type, title, and tone. So there's a few things that are kind of missing from this introduction, which I would probably just go about trying to check off, because introductions should be pretty formulaic by and large. Okay, let's have a look at the first body. Rossiter opens by arguing that the government has failed citizens with the incompetent trial. Yep, that sounds good. Really nice, clear, classic opener. Covers the main argument, the first part of the piece. Stating that it has let down Victorians. Okay, this is a really classic, common problem where basically someone splits a sentence in half with a full stop when it should be a comma. So here we've got a participle phrase, but we don't have a main subject and verb. So this sentence doesn't actually make sense. So we should join these two together. So stating that it has let down Victorians. Or alternatively, you could just cut this because it doesn't really add a lot. By putting quote marks around controlled trial of e-scooters, he implies that the trial has been anything but. This establishes a sarcastic tone from the outset. Okay, so this person's done a good job of finding the device, the persuasive device, and quoting it, but the effect is not particularly strong. So the effect should be one of four things. One, how does it produce an emotion in the audience? Two, how does it affect the way we think about the author? Three, how does it affect the way we think about the opposition? And four, how does it affect the way we view the topic? And this analysis doesn't really do that. It doesn't really explain this, so this needs more explanation. And also, this establishes a sarcastic tone from the outset. You would analyze tone. Just simply stating that the tone is there is retelling. So tone is a technique, needs analyzing, not just stating, because otherwise you're just retelling. Conveying how annoyed Rossiter is about this problem. Okay, again, another hacked sentence here, just a participle phrase with no subject or verb. Bad grammar really does have an impact on the reading experience because it just makes it so choppy to get through. An examiner's never going to grade something higher than maybe an 8 if the grammar's not good, because only sort of 2 to 3% of pieces get a 9 out of 10 or above, and they're just not going to give it to someone who can't write clearly. So already this piece is probably capped at an 8 out of 10 in terms of grammar. He uses alliteration such as painted a rosy picture as a panacea in order to make his piece more emphatic. Embedding of quotes is good, so that's strong. But again, in order to make his piece more emphatic, first thing, try and avoid words like make or force to say, like the author forces or makes the audience think or feel something. Just doesn't read particularly well, and VCAA's picked it up from time to time and said that they prefer a slightly more soft description of what the author does. And then to make his piece more emphatic, what is the effect of this? This person hasn't actually talked about the effect. Like when we say effect, it has to be, how does this change the way the audience thinks or feels about the author or position or topic? So if you're not answering that question, it's not analysis. This is just stating here. Additionally, his use of high-level language, okay, good connector here, such as panacea helps portray him as educated and thus a credible commentator. Perfect, that's really good. So good connector, then we've got technique, quote, and effect, and the effect is how does this make us feel about the author? So that's really good. Rossiter then goes on to further employ, okay, this bit here is tautological. We don't need then goes on and further. That just repeats itself too much. So we could just say Rossiter goes on to employ a cliche to convey how we should take the government's rosy view with a big grain of salt. Again, we've got the technique, we've got the quote, but no analysis. This serves to illustrate the bias in the government and how the audience can't trust them. Should have more formal language here. Cannot. Also, yeah, just take out contractions. Bias in the government and how the audience can't trust them. I think I would just phrase this differently. I would say, I don't know whether saying that it illustrates the bias in the government implies that the bias is actually there, when in actual fact I think he's just trying to position the government negatively. So I would probably rephrase this section. And how the audience can't trust them, again, a little bit general, try and make this a bit more specific. What is it that we can't trust? All right, continuing on. The author argues the trial is also hurting vulnerable community members. Okay, not bad. Solid topic sentence. By characterizing the violations by these writers as offences, a word with legal connotations, Rossiter positions these e-scooter users as breaking the law. Okay, legal connotations. I'm not sure whether it's really legal connotations. I think it's more just a legal term. Probably would be better. Breaking the law really doesn't add too much to what was there previously, so I would change to make this more specific. He goes on to note that such violations have flow-on effects, highlighting the broad ways in which the community is impacted. Again, we've just got one of these participle phrases. It's really becoming quite a common theme here and indicates that it's not just a one-time mistake, but it's a persistent issue with grammar. Highlighting the broad ways, yeah, okay. A little bit general. It'd be good if you could say how these people are being impacted. He also states that we were assured that any pedestrian who was hit and injured by an e-scooter rider would be covered by insurance. However, the insurance is nullified if a rider is doing anything illegal. It's a very long quote. Quotes should only be 2 to 7 words. After that, it really just... You're supposed to be analysing word choices and persuasive techniques. Rarely, unless you've got, a very long rhetorical question or something, rarely will you have to quote quite so much. Here, this person's quoted 2 sentences in the one quote, which shows how the laws have been ineffective. Okay, not terrible analysis. This makes the reader feel. Okay, so again, avoid makes. It encourages, leads, positions the reader to feel instead that the trial is having a devastating impact on local Victorians and that the legal system is failing to provide justice. Please fix up your spelling errors, especially if you've done a typed piece. It matters when it's written by hand, obviously. Like if an examiner picks up spelling errors, it's not a good look. But especially when it's typed, if you've got a red line under it, it just doesn't come across well if you don't use those sort of hints to edit your work after. And that the legal system is failing to provide justice. It's alright so far. His use of connotative words such as parking and dumping. Not sure that parking is connotative, but okay. Further help illustrate the carelessness of the e-scooter users. That's good. Positioning the audience to view them as reckless and inconsiderate. Okay, that's perfect. This is very high level analysis. So that's really good. This piece is a real mix. On the one hand, some of the grammar and expression and just like the wording in general, like there's so much missing from the introduction, suggests that it's perhaps not the strongest piece. But on the other hand, some of the analysis is really 10 out of 10. Having established how thick, definitely avoid using informal terms like this. Having established how inconsiderate we've already got, thoughtless, perhaps, the e-scooter users are themselves. He goes on to attack the government. Okay, really good transition here. Characterizing their extension of the trial, already established to be a failure, as lacking proper consultation. Yep, that sounds good. Positioning the government as persisting not only in a trial that is failing their population, but also in the basic functions of public discussion, with which are central to a democracy. Again, we've got a participle phrase here. Really don't want that. Very long. The analysis is okay, but this sentence is too long. I think it'd be better just to cut it in half if you can, and not here. Like if you're going to cut it in half here, you should, probably what we should do here instead is just say this positions. That's the other thing you can do if you've got a sentence that's sort of been chopped in half like that. But also in the basic, yeah, all right. Thus, the audience is positioned to view the extension of the trial as a disastrous misstep. Yeah, cool. That looks really good. Finally, the author closes by offering a solution. All right. A little bit short in terms of a topic sentence, but it's okay. It describes the 5 things, as less than 10 should be written in full, that the government must do in order to fix the problems with the e-scooter trials. Cool. That sounds good. His direct language and short sentences help convey that he is an efficient man who has done and fixed the problem. Okay, so the analysis is good to the extent that it's talking about how the author is positioned to look good. I just feel like the phrasing could be more formal there. It's a little bit informal. Also, we've got the technique and we've got the effect, but we don't have the quotes. So we need quotes. It really sounds a little bit unfinished if you talk about techniques without quoting them, because it suggests that you don't actually know where the technique is. Simple, clear directions such as to completely ban dockless footpath parking. Okay, see, this is much better. It just reads a lot more clearly. Provide the audience with an easy solution. Again, if you're going to analyze that, I feel like the analysis should be more complex. Yeah. Additionally, his suggestion that such changes would mean the issue of bad parking would all but disappear positions his solutions as an effective way to tackle an issue many of the audience would relate to. Okay, that's not bad. He goes on to explain how vulnerable people need to feel safe when walking. All right. Feels like a little bit of retelling. Let's see if there's more analysis. This use of emotive language combined with an appeal to safety leads the audience to feel empathy for those who are at risk and thus want to fix the issue. Okay, I feel like this bit up to here is pretty strong. But this here is just a little vague. Fix the issue. Again, probably needs to be specific. What is the issue? His repetition of the idea of vulnerable Victorians. Okay, good picking up that it's repeated, which doubles as alliteration. Yeah, true. Reinforces the idea, this is a really good verb, that people most in need of protection are the ones being let down by the system. Yeah, that's very strong. Good. This depicts the e-scooter companies as justice to encourage his well-meaning audience to want to contribute. Yeah, that sounds solid. Happy with that. I think this is particularly good. To close, the author reminds his audience of the values of equity, inclusion, access, and social participation that our government espouses. All right, fair bit of quoting, so we want to see that followed by analysis. He thus appeals to Australian values, encouraging his Australian audience to feel that the e-scooter crisis is a direct contradiction of our societal beliefs. This is really good. In specific, I like that they've talked about an actual segment of the Australian audience and why that value would be elicited in them particularly. Use of inclusive language to describe our government reminds voters, okay, really good audience segmentation here as well, that they personally are being let down. Yep, that's really good. His final sentence is a rhetorical question. Will they change the trial and hold operators to account or let them call the shots? Slightly long. Here's an example of one of those quotes where it does kind of have to be long to put the whole thing in. If you want to shorten it, you can cut the middle bit out and put 3 dots, an ellipsis instead. But I think this one's not quite long enough to warrant that. Through this, the author leaves the audience with the implied answer that whatever the government decides to do will be a direct reflection on the degree to which they adhere to the values they claim to propose. It's a little bit long-winded, but not bad. The analysis is good, however. Okay, doesn't really have a linking sentence, although that's not sort of fatal. Some schools don't really care as much about linking sentences as they used to. In conclusion, this essay explores, I wouldn't bother with that. In conclusion, probably we could just say Ben Rossiter argues that e-scooters should be illegal in Victoria. Does he say they should be illegal? I don't think so. I think it's more that the current trial hasn't worked. So I would say don't mischaracterize the argument. These little things where it's just a little bit, the student hasn't gone to the full effort of trying to work out what the argument is as specifically as possible, and they've kind of stopped. I don't want to say it's lazy, but like a few steps short of actually trying to work out what it is, and they've just gone with something that's sort of close enough. It just shows like a lack of finesse. And he uses logos to argue logically, tautological, so we'll take that out. Tautology is when you add in extra words that say what's already been said. Okay, this is a serious issue and will likely be debated a lot in Parliament over the next few years. Probably don't really need this, could be cut. Structure for conclusions, there's a couple of other things you could add in. We won't go through it here, but I think there's probably another video on it somewhere. By and large, I think this person's piece would be strengthened if they maybe mentioned a couple of other argument styles the author relies on, and then kind of the key takeaway that the audience might be left with. Something like that would probably work a bit better. Okay, so how do we feel about this overall? I think the piece definitely got better as it went on. The introduction and the conclusion are pretty sort of underwhelming. And the first body paragraph is frankly not great. The last one is slightly too long. I think 351 words is just a bit much. You'd have to be sure that you can write that across all your paragraphs so that you're giving a balanced analysis of the piece as a whole. Definitely gets better as it goes on though. I'd say probably here it's feeling like maybe a 6 out of 10. It's not quite hitting the 7 level. Also through here, it's still sort of 6.5, maybe a 7, just because of those grammar errors that keep cropping up. Through here, though, the analysis is quite good. I'd say if it were more consistent, it would probably be closer to like a high 8. So probably overall, to kind of put it in totality, I don't think it quite hits an 8 because this part here is not really consistent with the rest of it. It doesn't have moderately strong analysis the whole way through. So I'd probably say overall that's a 7 out of 10. If this person wanted to improve, first thing I would suggest is tidying up the grammar. Just really clean it up so that it reads smoothly and easily. That's a really good way to sort of get it safely over the 8 range. So that's the first thing. So key things to get it over an 8 out of 10. Grammar, really. That's the first thing I would start with. You are graded on it in English, like just can't get away from it. Also, level of analysis in the end is really good. I think if that was consistent throughout, this person would be they would have the ability probably to get a 9 out of 10 if they were able to write this consistently for a full essay. So I'd say make the analysis more consistent throughout. And what else? Oh yeah, fix up the introduction and conclusion. So just memorize a structure for the intro and conclusion and go with that. Don't try and sort of come up with anything fancy on the day. Just learn what are the key things you need to include and go through them. Anything else I would say to get it to an 8? No, I think as long as the piece was sort of more consistent and had this high level analysis throughout, it'd be pretty good in the tidying up of the grammar. So overall, reasonably strong essay. Student definitely has potential, and it could definitely be well over a 7 if they just made a couple of tweaks to how they write. I would tell this person, yeah, just keep working on these 3 things here. You'll probably have it at the 8 out of 10 level pretty quickly, which is great. If you want your essay marked, you want to see what someone who has marked hundreds of essays would say about it and had their grades kind of cross-marked by VCAA assessors, you're very welcome to submit it via the link down the bottom. Get feedback just like this. And if you add your email as well, we can send you a message to let you know once it's been uploaded so you don't miss the feedback on your piece.